Welcome to GovCon Unscripted, where we dive into the unfiltered stories and strategies from all around the world of government contracting. Join host Chelsea Roberts as she explores how to navigate, thrive, and win in this complex but lucrative industry.
All right. Hey, everyone, and welcome back to GovCon Unscripted. I'm your host, Chelsea Roberts, and today I've got Tom Barrow of Counsel at Woods Rogers. Tom, who are you and what do you do?
Hey, it's great to be here. I really appreciate it. Excited to talk about government contracting, which everyone should be. Yeah, my name is Tom Barrow. I'm a government contracts attorney at Woods Rogers. We're a Virginia firm, and I've only been with the firm for a little while. Before that, I was a general counsel and government contracts attorney for a small business here in Charlottesville, where I live. And then prior to that, I was in the Army for 20 years and 13 of that as a JAG. And actually how I got into this, the Army doesn't really let you specialize. They try to keep you as a generalist so that you can be plugged in anywhere. But I was fortunate enough to, throughout my career, continue to work in areas of government contracts and appropriations law and things like that. Got to teach at the Army JAG school here in Charlottesville as well. So I was there for 3 years teaching government contracts and appropriations law, and just fell in love with it. I think that's a weird thing to say, but in terms of the way my brain works, I guess I loved the rule-based nature of contract law much more than, criminal law or anything like that. That stuff was just not for me. So yeah, that's the short version.
I love that. And you've got a great background for what we're about to talk about today, which is a lot of the changes that are happening in things like appropriations laws and in policy. So I think let's start out with the topic of conversation for the day, which is ultimately there's lots and lots of changes happening specifically within the FAR and within changes relating to the federal acquisition regulation and reforming basically the acquisition environment for government contractors. And with all of that comes a lot of chaos, a lot of headaches, a lot of controversy, and a lot of discourse. And ultimately, you brought up a perfect topic of conversation for today, which is folks really probably don't have quite as much of a mind for what's not changing in FAR. So let's just dive right in. What do you think are some of the most important things people should be aware of that aren't changing in this massive FAR overhaul that we're going through?
Yeah, this came about. Interesting. I was listening and talking to friends of mine and different people that were seeing in the news all of these contracts are being terminated and all these things are happening. And actually listening to other podcasts from specifically the legal side and talking through what all those changes look like. And it just occurred to me, man, there's a lot left that's not going to be changing. And we can go through what the actual executive order said and those kinds of things. But I think the thing to remember is you've got a ship that's moving, very huge ship, and it's not going to turn on a dime, even though the administration seems to be trying to do that. There are a number of things that can't be changed that quickly. The main thing I think people need to keep in mind is that the president and the executive branch is only able to change things that are regulatory. The statutes that underlie all of those regulations, if those specify certain things have to be done, certain rules have to be in place, whatever those rules are, those things are not going to change without Congress acting to change those rules. And there's a lot of statutory basis behind the federal acquisition system that I think we should keep in mind so that nobody feels like all the ground is sand and shifting. There's a lot left that we can put our feet on and keep our sanity, I guess, to that extent as change happens around us. Yeah, did you want to go through some of the specific ones?
Yeah, and I want to stop just really quick and ask probably a very simple question and ask you to define the difference between regulation and statute.
Yeah, great. The system that we've got is, of course, there's 3 branches of government, back to civics class, and you have the Congress, which is passing statutes that require certain things. And man, this is a whole subject of a podcast or classes or whatever.
Sure.
They pass the statutes in order to affect whatever the will of Congress is politically. And so those could be things that Congress has the power of the person. I think that's an important thing to remember. The way Congress usually speaks is they say no money can be used for this, or this amount of money has to be used for that. And in the context of acquisitions, that's what we're talking about, is the government applying its money to achieve the goals that it has. So when Congress passes those statutes, and then the executive branch is charged with implementing the laws of the country, then the executive branch goes and reads those statutes. And Congress, even though it does write gigantic bills, it can't possibly think of every permutation of facts that are possible in the world.
Right.
So the statute's this big, and then the executive branch steps in and says, that's not enough for us to actually do what we're supposed to do. We're going to need implementing regulations. So you have two main sources to look at. One is called the U.S. Code, and that is where all of the laws that are passed by Congress end up codified. And then you have the Code of Federal Regulations, which has thousands and thousands of implementing regulations written by the administrative organizations within the executive branch. And that's how we end up getting the federal acquisition regulation itself. Is the Code of Federal Regulations, specifically Part 48 of it, is the federal acquisition regulation. Right. And so it's within the president's purview as the leader of the executive branch to change the things that are in the Code of Federal Regulations. But again, those were based on the statutes that were passed by Congress, and he can't change those without Congress changing them. So that's what I was trying to focus. So if we can change the Code of Federal Regulations, and in this case, again, Part 48, we can only change it to the extent that it remains consistent with the laws that Congress passed. And that was where I was hoping to put our feet.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. That was a fantastic explanation. And I think folks probably are somewhat familiar, or at least have heard of Part 48 in their times as government contractors. So let's dive right in. What's really changing, and how contradictory is that are we seeing to things that are in the Code of U.S. regulations?
Well, I think the things that the administration is trying to get after, and this is a large topic, it's been going on for basically forever, acquisition reform.
Right.
The process for buying things in federal acquisition is just cumbersome. It's difficult. There are so many rules that people have tried to figure out how many pages the FAR actually consists of. And it's hard to even do that.
Yeah.
And so every few years, I'd say every maybe 10 or so years, someone comes up with a great idea to try to reform it and get it where you can streamline the acquisition process. And I think that's a laudable goal. I think there's some competing things, and this is a little off topic, but I think it forms some of the basis for what we are talking about. There's this thing we used to teach in our government contracts classes, and that there are three main things that you want out of an acquisition system.
Okay.
You want good products.
Right.
You want them quickly.
Sure.
And you want them at a good price.
Okay, everybody does.
Everybody wants that. But the problem is you can only have two of those three at any given time, unless you're doing something really counter to the market forces that this whole system's operating in. So you can have things quickly and they can be at a low price, but they're going to be cheaply made, bad quality. So there's a trade-off there.
Right.
Now, the administration now is trying to take the efficiency, the speed of the acquisition process, and get everything out of the way so that we focus on speed. It is also trying to focus everything on quality. And that means the prices are going to go up, is basically what that means.
Economics.
Economics. It's very simple. Yes. If you want those two things, if you want it to be quick and really high quality, it's going to be expensive. Sure. So those are some of the trade-offs that the administration is dealing with. But as you were saying earlier, there are some things that they can change and some things that they can't change. One of the things that they can't change in the drive to increase the efficiency of government contracting is competition. It's required by the law, by the Competition and Contracting Act, that everybody out there that has the ability to provide goods and services to the federal government is going to get a chance to do that.
Right.
And so the most efficient government contract in the world would be the government just picks whoever it wants and just issues contracts all day long.
Sure.
But they can't. And they can't do that specifically because Congress many years ago passed the Competition and Contracting Act. And that history of competition goes back before our country even. And the idea there is to say, within certain parameters, so yes, you have to be a company that functions, that you're not bankrupt, you haven't been accused of crimes as a company, those kinds of things. But within those parameters, you should be able to compete for these government contracts. So one of the things I think that everyone started to get worried about at first was that competition was going to go out the window for some reason. It will not go out the window. And that's one of the reasons the FAR revision is taking place, so that we can try to streamline what the regulations are, but within the framework still of a competitive government contract landscape. So I think that's one of the big things people need to remember is that we can't jettison it. That's statutory, and the president doesn't have the power to change that.
Do we see competition going up as a result of this? I personally have never bought into the nothing will be competition free, everything will just be handed out and doled out as people wish. But I've seen more doors opening to an increased level of competition by companies that have not traditionally worked for the government or haven't traditionally found it to be an attractive market. And so having some new acquisition approaches and new acquisition methods seems, at least to me, like it could very well increase competition and have some more enhanced competitions within the government contracting landscape.
Yeah, Chelsea, that's a great point. As soon as you step in and try to remove regulations, you're going to see more people attracted to the government acquisition market. One of the things that we saw over the last 15 or 20 years is the development of what are called the other transaction authority
I love
contracts.
them. They're one of my favorites. Yep.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
super familiar. I'm absolutely an advocate for them. And I think they're a fantastic method for acquisition. And I think that they do increase competition, and they do so in a way that's effective for the government and effective for industry.
Yes. And the reason they do is because the government said, look, we have contractors out there we can't reach because the process is too opaque, it's too difficult. And we need a way that we can sidestep some of those regulations and actually get down to just it's not simple, a process of negotiating contract terms on a more equal basis between the government and the contractors. What we're seeing now is a move away from these reams and reams of onerous regulations and towards something more streamlined that people can get their heads around when they're thinking of working with the government. Now, part of that also is the administration's push for commercial item acquisition specifically. And this is a great thing to keep in mind. A commercial product is developed, you think of Shark Tank. A commercial product is developed so that it can be attractive to customers, so that it will function well. It's going to be a quality product or it's going to go out of business.
Yeah.
And they develop the products to be quality products, to do well at whatever it is. They are priced in a way that puts them competitive in the marketplace so that they're not going to charge. Okay, yes, if you're the only maker of a certain smartphone, you can charge whatever you want for that smartphone.
Sure.
Okay, fine. But within the context of competition, again, the government's going to continue to compete these things. In the context of that, these commercial products are priced specifically to be competitive. So the government can then take advantage of both the price being already set by the manufacturers to be a competitive price in the marketplace. And also the quality of that product is going to be as high as they can, as high as the company can make it for that price point. And so that removes so much of what the government does when it says, hey, you know what, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have somebody build us a new computer program. All right, what does that look like? Why don't you guys put together some stuff and come and show us? And a year goes by, and they bring in the thing and the government says, yeah, not what we wanted, or maybe it was what we wanted a year ago. It's not what we want now. Go back and redo it. Yeah. This iterative process takes forever. You are paying for that iterative process to take place unless the solicitation is written up some way where the government can protect itself from that. But it's not a great idea. And in the long run, if there is a commercial product out there that's already of the right quality and of the right price, just buy that. And so to your question, is that going to increase competition? I think it will, because the companies that are out there that have commercial items, commercial products that they're selling, and they can take those unchanged and pivot them into the commercial marketplace or into the federal marketplace. That's going to be great for those companies that are out there, especially as the regulatory backdrop of all of that is reduced and they can understand the terms on which they're selling to the government.
Right.
They don't have to hire 5 people just to understand, I'm selling you 100 widgets. I made these great widgets. Why do I need 5 people to figure out how to write the document or whatever?
Yeah,
so,
and a DCAA accountant.
If you're not small and if you have to worry about the cost accounting standards, then yeah, as the general counsel and government contracts attorney for the small business I worked for, every now and then they would slide a cost accounting standards contract across the desk and be like, so what do you think about this? I'm like, yeah, we can't do this. We'll never do this. Unless you want to hire 15 people to keep it straight. Yeah. So those are definitely some of the things that we're going to see. I think that's a great point.
So competition's not going anywhere.
Yeah, competition's not going anywhere.
Perfect. What else?
Another thing is So I used to teach our incoming sales folks. The very first class I ever taught them as they came in the door was, why are we doing business with the federal government in the first place? Why would we do this? It's so hard. The answer is the government turns out to be an incredibly good customer. Turns out to be a great customer because there are laws on the books that require the government, and again, laws can't be changed by the executive branch, not that they would, but there are laws on the books that the government has to pay its bills. It's a suite of laws called the Anti-Deficiency Act, and there are other associated rules as well. But it means the government's got the deepest pockets around.
Yep.
They have a voracious appetite. I'm sure someone on your podcast has mentioned the fact that the U.S. federal government, and I don't have numbers to back this up, this is anecdotal, but is the largest consumer of goods and services, the U.S. federal government, of any single customer in the world.
Yep.
For all goods and services. That's an incredible thing. And then again, it has to pay its bills. And if they don't, you can sue them. And which I think is an absolutely awesome, so called a waiver of sovereign immunity. And it's the government saying that it's going to be accountable to the people. And again, one of the things that we've been talking about over the last 3 or 4 months has been all of these contracts that are being terminated. And I think the feeling is that there's a massive amount of money that is owed to these contractors that they'll never see. And so I want to remind everyone that the rules that apply to, again, the Anti-Deficiency Act, the government making good on paying the things that it's supposed to pay, that hasn't changed. None of that's changed. And none of that could change because it's all based in, again, waivers of sovereign immunity. Those come from statutes. And now this is the hard part. The process for that in what's called the terminations for convenience process is you get the right to submit a settlement request proposal. So you say, look, I understand you don't need my contract anymore. But for example, if you're construction, I've already bought the materials, I've hired the labor, I've gotten the insurance that I need, I've put up the bonds. I'm going to need to be made whole. And that's still going to happen. And that's still hopefully in the works for everyone whose contracts have been terminated as a result of this DOGE effort and all that. That is still out there. That is still now. I think there was also a force reduction, and I think that hit the government contracting workforce as well. So it's going to slow things down. But again, the rules that require the government to pay its bills are still there, and it may take some time. And I would encourage everyone to continue to lean on their contracting folks, the contracting officers and the corps and everybody that they are working with to get those things resolved. But it's not going anywhere. They will get their money, or they will have the right to sue for that money in court, in the federal claims or wherever.
Now that becomes a tricky kind of topic of conversation because in government contracting, you never want to do wrong by your government customer. And in any market, you don't want to piss off your customer. Customer's always right. You want to keep them as happy as possible, get good reviews and so on. In the cases where companies find that they're waiting what feels like ages to be made whole, do you suggest that they take legal action? Is that something that you feel like would be damaging to their relationships with their government customers as a whole and in the future? Or do you feel like that they should just sit back, wait, and take it?
That's a great point. Yes, we want to maintain the relationships that we have with our customers, but I think you can respectfully say, government contracting officer, here is my claim, respectfully. You owe me this money, and then there's a procedure for that. So you submit your claim. The contracting officer has a certain amount of time to react to it. If they don't, then you can assume they're giving you a no. Sure. And one of the things I could stress here is something that I have heard in every symposium I've ever been to where industry is talking to government folks and government folks are talking to other government folks, is they're always saying communication is the key.
Right.
Always saying that. And I think that doesn't change in this situation either, because government contracting officers, having worked with a number of them when I was in the Army and advising them, they are conscientious, hardworking individuals that want to do the right thing as well. So if you call them up and you say, listen, I understand you're terminating this contract. I'm going to get my settlement proposal together, or you've denied my settlement proposal and I'm going to need to file a claim. You can do all of that while still preserving the professional relationship that you have with them. They understand you need to do that stuff. And I don't want to sound cynical, but at the end of the day, the contract officer is the amount of money that's ultimately paid is going to probably come from a judgment fund. It's not going to come from that organization anyway.
Okay.
So I think there are opportunities to ruin your relationship with your government customer, and those should definitely be avoided if possible. The process is the process. And one of the reasons I love it so much is because everybody knows the process. You're not surprising the contracting officer by submitting a claim. And you can do that in a respectful way that continues your relationship as well, I think, in most cases.
That's fantastic. I'm sure music to people's ears right now. So
Yeah.
that's great news and great advice. And
Awesome.
this is not to be taken for legal advice by anybody, but yes,
No.
yeah, you do have that background, so we will listen very carefully.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. The best thing to do would be to make sure that you have a cognizable claim. You've got something that's legitimate, and then use your rights under that federal acquisition regulation itself, and take advantage of those wherever possible.
Go by the rules.
Go by the rules. That's right.
I like it.
Yep.
What else isn't changing?
Although it probably didn't seem like it at first with some of the things the administration did, small business involvement is
Yes.
not going to. So it did change. So one of the things we need to keep in mind is, again, this difference between the statutory requirements and the regulations themselves. Specifically, so the Small Business Act is a law, and it does set the 5% goals for each socioeconomic category, those kinds of things.
Sure.
And an overall requirement of 23% of the federal spend has to go to small businesses. That's a requirement in the law. It's not going to change. Now, what did change, and I'm sure many people that are listening to this will know, the administrations over time increase or decrease the percentages that they want within the executive branch to meet for small business categories. I worked for a HubZone company for 6 years and was never tired of pointing out to people that the government has never met its HubZone goal ever.
Yep.
But anyway, be that as it may, one of the things that the administration did was to significantly reduce the amount of the federal spend that was required to go to 8A small and disadvantaged businesses.
Okay.
That was something that the previous administration had set, I believe, at 15%. It had been
Right.
historically. And but again, this is a perfect explanation or a perfect example of the difference. So the president could reduce that from the 15% for 8As down, but he couldn't eliminate it. All he could do is reduce it to the statutory requirement, which is 5%. So that's what it stands at now. So that's a great way to illustrate where the president's power stops and where it ends, and runs right into the statutory requirements. And so that is a statutory requirement, 5%. And so it's not going to go below that. So you will continue to see the acquisition world, you will continue to see agencies looking to the small business partners that they have to meet their goals. Yes, it is still 23% overall. And one of the things that hasn't changed, by the way, if you're an 8A, is the sole source authority that they do enjoy
Right.
for contracts to be awarded through the 8A program. So that process, of course, is the agency submits a letter to the SBA asking to put an acquisition into that program, and usually they already know the contractor they want to go with. The SBA will take a look at that requirement. If they approve it for the 8A program, then the contractor can receive a direct award. So none of that has changed. And I can tell you also, working for a company that wasn't an 8A, that we understood what an administrative advantage that is for agencies to be able to do that in terms of the timing and everything. So even though the requirement of 15% has been dropped to 5%, that doesn't mean it's not still in the best interest of the agencies, and ultimately, obviously, for the companies that are 8As and looking for this work. They're still going to be able to take advantage of those programs. I don't think that'll drop that much. Honestly, it has not been my impression over the years that agencies are awarding to 8As because they're afraid of being hit with a stick. Instead, it's good for them to do that. It's helpful. So I don't think that's going to go away. Yeah, that would be I think that would be a great thing to keep in mind, is that the small business world will remain relevant to government contracting even as we go through many of these changes.
I was actually at the 8A conference in February, and there was a whole lot of discussion about whether or not the program will continue on, companies trying to decide whether or not it would be worth it to pursue the program, to get into it. And not just 8As, woman-owned, service-disabled, veteran-owned, and HubZones, all of them are churning away at the question of, is this going to be relevant? Is it going to go away? And I believe most of those programs, if not just the 8A program, are congressionally mandated. So there is the requirement for Congress to, if that were to be adjusted or to be taken out, that would have to be a congressional act. And I think that Congress has a whole lot more to worry about than small businesses, and they are pretty much fervent advocates for small businesses, especially within their districts. So I would be very surprised to see additional impacts to those programs. And I absolutely agree. Those are still very relevant and they're still incredibly important within the federal contracting ecosystem. So it's great to hear that you're of the opinion that's not going away, that's not going to change, and it's still incredibly relevant within this changing acquisition landscape.
Yes, I think it is. And I know the push towards administrative efficiency within government acquisitions, and also I mentioned earlier, it was not necessarily a priority, at least within the last executive orders that have come out on this subject, for cost savings. Just not because, again, you've got these legs of the stool. And so
Sure.
one of the cost savings you can get, and I think one of the executive orders did push the commercial acquisitions emphasis, and that has the potential to drive down costs if you are displacing something that is currently being developed for the government. And you say, look, okay, we're not going to get that customized deal, that customized product, but if we go to the commercial solution, we're going to get it for a much lower price because it's going to be a market responsible price and those kinds of things. And I think a lot of the criticism of the acquisition system has been around endless development contracts, things that are over budget and over scheduled, and end up seeming to be just a kind of hole where they're throwing money, as opposed to just buying a solution that already exists. Now, I will say, though, just a slight topic deviation here. It's not just this administration, but over the last 10 years, things with CMMC and all of the different things that have come up with the increase in the security, not just cybersecurity, but supply chain risk.
Right.
So here's the problem, and I don't know how they're going to fix this. If you want commercial items, they're not developed with supply chain risk management. They're also not necessarily developed in order to appease the government's ever-increasing cybersecurity requirements. You do have things like FedRAMP, I think, but it shows you what I mean. There's a list of things on FedRAMP, and if you're not familiar with what that is, it's a certification process that the government has to certify the security of cloud-based software applications. But the fact that there's a list of what is FedRAMPed and everything else isn't just highlights the problem. The problem is these commercial products that the administration is pushing us to go buy, pushing the government to go buy, will not, at this point anyway, meet the federal cybersecurity or supply chain risk requirements that are coming and always growing. And there's no market incentive for the companies to do that.
Yeah.
Joe Consumer doesn't need a FedRAMP quality kind of solution.
Right.
That's why there's so many that aren't.
Yeah.
So I think at some point the administration is going to run headlong into that kind of dichotomy. You can get commercial products, but they will not be up to that standard. And then if you want them up to that standard, guess what? To that extent, they aren't commercial products anymore. So now you're going to pay.
Exactly.
So
you're going to have to
there
foot
goes
the
the
bill
cost.
for that.
Yeah. So I just wanted to throw that in there. I think that's an interesting aspect that we'll watch, see what the administration does.
Yeah, I'm really curious. Do you think that there will be a shift into the government footing the bill for that type of security to be implemented?
That's a great point too. So where during the acquisition process does this thing do these additional requirements come in? I dealt with this a lot on the software side when the government would try to buy a commercial software solution.
Right.
And like it's something simple, like a programmed screen grab or something, like nothing complicated. But then they look at the end user license terms and they say, yeah, I'm not going to agree to that or that. And there is a FAR process in FAR Part 12 for this. And the government is supposed to act as if it is a commercial consumer when it's buying commercial products. And then they don't. And then they want everything to be customized after the fact. So if you go out and you say to industry, hey, I want to buy this commercial product from you because it's competed all the things we talked about earlier. It's competed and its quality is there. Okay. And I want the price, right? I want the commercial price.
Yes.
So it's $100. All right. But for that $100, I would like you to ramp up the cybersecurity on it. I would like you to investigate your supply chain. I would like you to remove everything made from this company or that country. And oh, by the way, I still want it to be $100. And the company's gonna be like, yeah, it's now $400. So there's nothing you can do about that. I think the only way, I mentioned earlier briefly, just off the cuff, that the only way that you can get all three of those things, the quality, the speed, and the price, is if you artificially manipulate the market. And I think when you do that, you inevitably hurt industry.
Yes.
And so if it remains a question of the government buying commercial products as they are developed by the commercial marketplace, it just remains to be seen how we will square that circle, because they're not up to the federal standards. That's in some ways what makes them commercial products. Because if they were, they would not be commercial products. They would be specifically designed for the federal government, and that would defeat the purpose. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting thing to see how they end up balancing that as they roll out these changes.
That will be particularly interesting to see. And I think I've got my eyes on that in terms of seeing how acquisition reform progresses and seeing how folks start to either adapt or adjust or drop.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want them to flee. Like we said earlier, this has the opportunity, if it's done right, to increase competition, and not just competition, but participation in the federal marketplace. Or if they say, look, your commercial product now has to meet all these requirements, people might just flee, and you've essentially not done what you wanted to do, which is reduce the regulatory burden on acquisitions and everything. You will have essentially just not fixed it. It might be worth mentioning at this point. That might be one of the reasons why acquisition reform has always been hard. And I don't know if there's an easy button. I think in terms of the commercial emphasis, the administration tried to do something. I think it's unprecedented in at least the way that they did it, is to place really what amounts to personal accountability on contracting officers.
Right.
Say, if you're not buying a commercial product, you're going to stand on the carpet and explain it. Yeah, that's an approach. I think those explanations, after having been in the government for 20 years, what may end up happening is that those explanations will become not codified, but they will become standardized.
Sure.
And so you'll say, look, here's my application to buy something that's not a commercial product, and we'll develop a playbook of 10 or 15 explanations, and you'll say, this is explanation number 3.
Sure.
And they'll say, all right, explanation number 3, fine, go for it. And the problem is, to the extent that works, it swallows the entire project of forcing everyone to use commercial products. So we're right back where we started. It's just a hard problem.
It's a really hard problem to solve. And there's so much changing right now that folks are undoubtedly having a hard time keeping up with what's changing. And I'm thankful and really appreciative that we've taken the time to drop a couple of knowledge bombs on folks of things that aren't changing, so that they can have a little bit more secure footing and a little bit more confidence in their understanding of things as they're going forward, and specifically within the acquisition reform realm. This has been a fantastic conversation. And as things keep changing, I would absolutely love to get you back on the show to figure out what are those pillars going to be that folks can hold on to that aren't going to shift and that won't change.
Yeah, I would love to. And they're starting to put them out. If you've seen the overhaul page that they put up, it's not got a lot on it yet, but yeah.
Yes, as things start to get added to that, we will definitely have an opportunity for you to come back on and have another conversation. If folks want to get a hold of you, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can look us up on our website, woodsrogers.com, or you can email me. I'm Thomas. That's my actual name, thomas.barrow@woodsrogers.com. And you can get us that way as well.
And you're on LinkedIn too, as well, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Wonderful. This has been an amazing opportunity to talk about things that are sticking still for folks that are really deep in the acquisition reform and trying to get their footing. So I really appreciate you showing up and having this conversation today. Any final words?
I think everybody just needs to hang on and wait until the dust settles. It's going to be a time of change, and I think if they do it right, this can be actually a very positive moment for government contracts. So here's to hoping.
Optimism's up. I love it.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tom. I hope you have a great rest of your day and a fantastic rest of your week.
You too. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of GovCon Unscripted with your host, Chelsea Roberts. Do you have a GovCon story or need guidance in government contracting? Connect with Chelsea on LinkedIn to be a guest on the show or to enhance your business strategy. Don't forget, your network is your net worth. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with your growing GovCon community.